What do we have here? This is Catus Maximus. This is the Duralast with the not accurately silkscreen name, Gimbal Ratchet. This is a quarter-inch drive. They also have them in 3/8, I believe. The idea is this is a thumb ratchet, just like any other kind of small automotive quarter-inch thumb ratchet. This may be a more traditional one. It's about the same size, but of course, it has two sets of pivots. A while ago, I did a review on a 3/8 one where it only had one pivot, like the outer ring, but this actually has two, so this can tilt one direction as well as a second direction. And in theory, this could help save a bit of cramping, a bit of energy, be more ergonomic, and be a bit faster. And work in slightly tighter spaces than what would be the alternative, which would be like a universal socket or something even longer, which would be a universal with a socket on the end of it, just like this setup here. However, the big Achilles heel is they made the pivots just way, way too stiff in this ratchet here. So if you end up having a socket, this is a big old 9/16 socket, it just has so much friction that it really doesn't help you. It's actually worse and hinders you just too much just because they made those pivots too tight. It's almost like years of people's complaints about loose pivots. Now engineers are making everything have super duty pivots, and something like this really isn't a good idea, because really you want that center gimbal piece to really freely move so that when you're ratcheting and you're in a more awkward situation, that this blue ring is something that you just can keep in your hand, and it can be at a more natural angle instead of, trying to wrench your hand in a weird situation, just be on your fingertips, just being able to turn it down and then be able to ratchet and then return. It should be pretty easy moving, just like a universal joint. So this is part of like a set that's $25, or they sell this on the shelf. This was actually on sale at my local one for $13.99. So I said, I went ahead and went for it. Although I didn't quite notice in the store that the reverse lever is plastic instead of being metal. Once again, one of those items that they should have made just a little bit nicer. What I found interesting is, even though it's like a round roto head ratchet, the anvil is actually really surprisingly tight in it. And it's like during engineering, it was just binding up, so they just decided to make it have a super tight anvil, which is really nice. Too bad the pivots, once again, are just too tight. So let's take a quick look at the ratchet mechanism and see how good it is inside there. And then I'll take a quick look at what we can do to fix those pivots. And this seems to be the design that's just taking over all round head ratchets. This is a heart spring. I've got it upside down. There's our heart spring with a walking dog, and it's called a walking dog because as the mechanism ratchets around, the dog walks along, and then when you go backwards, the spring just holds it in that forward position so that this crossbar just tries to press the pawl straight out through the side of the ratchet. It's actually a very strong design because the angle of force is almost straight outwards rather than being at more of a slanted angle. So it's not a bad mechanism. We can see that it's bone dry in there. That's real special of AutoZone. All right, let's take a look at those pivots. Oh, I should mention that at least, even though it's a plastic switch, they did include a metal peg. And always tip with these types of ratchets, you got to get the heart spring or two little posts into the hole on the pawl, and then you kind of take the post and push it forward and then snap the reverse lever down and put the screw in. Alright, so I discovered it was a pretty simple modification, it was just an adjustment. So they just had these screws just torqued all the way down. They have some kind of adhesive thread locker, so it's not like Loctite blue. It would be equivalent to maybe Loctite green, which is just provides a little bit of anti-loosening, I should say. And so I just backed off just a little bit to get a light amount of tension. It will probably take just a couple little adjustments to get it tuned just how you might like it, or how I might like it, I should say. But it works so much better when it's loose, and we can see the whole point. If I ratchet this way and we're at an odd angle, if I can get this in good focus, you can see what the inner ring is doing is it's actually acting more like a universal joint. So if you're in a weird situation, you can just turn the socket, and the blue ring, the idea is the blue ring can spin this way while the socket is spinning this way, just like a drive shaft. And that would be the point of a gimbal ratchet. It was kind of hard to show on the camera, but one thing I thought was interesting is they did drill little holes that didn't go quite all the way through both the center ring as well as the ratchet head. and then when they pressed in like little thin steel plates into the bottom of the holes, so that the bottom of these set screws would have something to ride against besides just aluminum, so it wouldn't wear out too fast. And I did appreciate that touch. And to finish this video off, now that this is working a little more smoothly, I can show the distinct difference. There's still a little bit of a hump region, but it's not too bad. The hump region here would be that the socket should just be able to rotate all the way around the blue ring, but right where it gets to the confinement of the side screw here, just due to the nature of the large socket that I'm using, if I can get this to focus properly, we have this little region where it kind of bumps up and it'll turn, and then when we get to the other one, it will rise up, but it's not much. But it's a big advantage of this being like a roto head. They call it a gimbal, but it's like a roto head ratchet, but you're driving it over the top. Being in the center line, because even a standard universal joint, because these pins are not not over the top of each other, when you're at a steep angle, what ends up happening is the socket kind of wobbles to one side and then kind of pivots to another side, and it kind of causes it to want to bind up and makes it a bit more difficult to use. Or something like this, if you can be at a very steep angle and still have really smooth operation, as long as you're not running into that little hump region there, you won't even notice. And this can actually be, once again, something that can be not a lifesaver, but can certainly save some cramps and hassle. And that's why I like this. It's really surprising how a little thing like that, if you're working with transmission bolts and stuff, you can just get it in there, and then you can just rotate this ring at just about any kind of angle, and it doesn't want to rock around. The socket will rotate, and you can just go at it. I think this thing is kind of cool now that it's adjusted. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody watching and subscribing. And at some point, I'll learn a better video editing software so I can equalize the volumes. For apparently on my camera microphone setup, it's a little, there isn't a very good option, or I haven't found it yet, to reduce what is, I believe, called the compression, where it's inappropriately adjusting the gains from light to heavy sounds. Anyway, until next time, Catus Maximus out.